Hey, good morning. It's Monday, the 16th of March 2020. My name's Eric Leach and this is Exposure Box, and we're in Old Hanwell. We're talking about controlled parking zones. Controlled parking zones, the original intention was to improve road safety and to reduce congestion. The cynics among us think that it's a way of raising revenue, particularly where grants have been reduced to local authorities over the last few years. CPZ started in Ealing well over 10 years ago in the centre, then around stations, tube and railway stations, then around schools, and then everywhere. They've been in Hanwell for a while, but the latest piece of the jigsaw is about to be played, and it's by far the most complex one because Old Hanwell is a cul-de-sac. It's surrounded by the river, it's surrounded by a cemetery, it's surrounded by CPZs, it's surrounded by the Uxbridge Road. And if cars are displaced, where are they to go? Now, the first person I'm going to introduce you to is the chair of Old Hanwell Residents Association, Samantha O'Connor. So, Samantha, I know you've done some research of the likely impact of this CPZ. Do you want to tell us what you've discovered?
We undertook our own audit. We've been asking for quite some time for the council and our councillors to get an exact idea of how many cars would be displaced. We haven't had any information back on that. We attended the Ward Forum meeting and have asked for those facts to be given to us. 10 days later, we're still waiting. So we decided that we would undertake our own audit of the streets. So with the use of Google and measuring out and to scale, we found out that cars will be displaced, 182 cars will be displaced from the yellow lines, and that 76 cars, up to 76 cars, will be displaced from the shared bays. The shared bays will be allowed for other people to park in for up to £4.50 a day, other people being the new residents of Wicks, the new residents of Peugeot, Marshall and Elthorne Heights. So they can be considered a loss because they will be taken out of what we currently have here as the current parking, that we're at 88% stress already. Okay. Now, another local resident, Steve, I'm going to ask him about any attempts at negotiation with the council and the consultation itself in 2019.
Well, we spoke to the council back in October. Originally, they wanted to do the consultation in November, and we said, well, that's crazy, trying to do it in the run-up to a general election in the run-up to Christmas. So that they pushed it out into the spring of 2020. We said, well, that's great, because that gives us time then for you to send something around to residents, telling them what's going to happen, put something on the website, and we could have a public meeting where you explain the plans to all the local residents. They didn't want to do any of that. And what's really surprised me is that there's nothing on the council's website. There is nothing in the public domain about these plans at all. You have to write off, right. And it takes you then 7 days before they send something back to you.
Well, I actually live in a neighbouring CPZ, and I wrote to Tony Singh, whose name is on these leaflets, saying going to be impacted possibly with dispersal, and we're going to make a video on this. We'd like to interview him. Oh, that was on the 6th of March. We've had no response whatsoever. So what comments you'd like to make as a local resident of the plans as you know them?
I've lived in restricted areas and non-restricted parking areas, and much prefer a non-restricted area. I think it can be a bit chaotic at times, but I think people make it work by just sort of working together on it. And if we're going to lose 180 parking spaces in Old Hanwell, it's going to be a complete disaster. I also really do not need any more bureaucracy in my life. I'm actually have an old diesel. Because I can't afford to get an electric car. I would like an electric car in the future. So for me, sort of electric charging points are very, very important. And it's also, I don't want traffic wardens in this area. We really don't need any more stress than we have in our lives already. And I think if there are fewer parking spaces every time you come home, it's going to be a complete nightmare.
Well, Sadly, what you're going to discover if you live in a CPZ, it's quite complicated for people, especially older people, to figure out how they get the electronic vouchers for visitors.
Yes.
And some of them have given up on the idea of visitors because they can't figure out
Yes.
how to use the council's website.
Yes, and I do not want my visitors getting a £120 parking ticket.
That's right, yeah.
The whole thing is, I think, a lot of hassle, and people think it's going to
Yeah.
it's going to be better for us, but I think in the long term it's going to be worse for us.
Right, okay. Right, and another local resident, so what points would you like to make over and above what we've just heard?
Well, the thing that really concerns me is one of the extraordinary things about Old Hanwell is its extraordinary sense of community. It's a little village in the middle of town, and we are going to be facing the greatest challenge for probably the last 100 years, excluding wartime, with the COVID-19 breakout. And community is going to become incredibly important. We're really going to have to rally round. And this kind of CPZ is just going to pit neighbour against neighbour. As one after the other, they will be fighting for a dwindling parking availability. We've already heard from Sam what the numbers are likely to be, and that is exactly what we don't need at this time of national crisis.
Well, you've heard what people think here. The plans, if you apply for them and get them, you can comment on them until the 25th of March. We want to get this video out as soon as possible, distribute to as many people as possible. So right, some final comments now from people, and let me throw one in. If you've got a 2-litre car and you're paying £105 a year and you can't find anywhere to park, you're going to get very, very annoyed and very, very angry. So for 2 final points, let's go back to Samantha.
I think the other point that's quite important, if you bear in mind adding up the displaced cars and the shared bays, we're looking at about 280 cars. On the first night of implementation, there'll be 280 cars that have paid for their parking permits. The council have confirmed to us that there will be no limit to the supply, although the demand is going to totally outstrip. Those 283 cars will now you'll see we're in the middle of the streets. We have no traffic in Hanwell. That first night, the whole of Old Hanwell will become gridlocked with 280 cars driving round and round and round. That will continue to go on for a number of weeks, and I want to know what the council intend to do about that impending disaster.
Okay, so I know that you have an idea about how things could proceed, perhaps on a civilised basis.
I've got a slightly more radical idea about something that the residents of Old Hanwell could do, because we are such a close community here, and it is a small, sort of quite discreet area. I think that we could create our own parking organisation, that we get together, we decide how many parking spaces we need, we decide how much it's going to cost, we decide how many people need electric charging bays, how many people need safe bike places and motorbike places, and we work in liaison with the council, and we take control of this ourselves, because I can just see so many problems down the line, but I think a united group of residents could do a lot better, actually.
Okay, well, look, thank you all very much. I suspect we'll be coming back again if this is implemented, and it clearly is going to be a shambles, so thank you very much.